So we're recording, we're going to share this afterwards. We're really glad to have you here. This is the first webinar that we have hosted. We've been on other webinars that other partners have hosted, so we're really excited to get into this and kind of talk more directly with people interested in Inventory Planner. We have both current users and folks who are not using Inventory Planner right now. So let us know what questions you have. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a Q&A section. There's a chat section. Pop in there with any questions that you have. Let us know what's on your mind, how we can help. We'll be answering questions as we can throughout the webinar, and then afterwards, at the end of the presentation, we'll be answering any questions that we didn't hit earlier. If there's something really specific to your situation, to your store, we're glad to follow up with you one-on-one to discuss that specific situation. So anything that's kind of broadly applicable to the group, glad to discuss on the webinar. Otherwise, we'll follow up with you one-on-one. Please do let us know your feedback with this. As I said, it's our first webinar that we're hosting, so we want to know what you want to know. Did we answer your questions? What other topics do you want to cover? Let us know. We would definitely want your feedback on this. So just a quick overview of what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to get into an introduction to demand planning, what it is, why to do it, how it can help your business and really scale your e-commerce business. We're going to get into, within Inventory Planner, how to customize your forecast and settings, what that'll do for your demand planning. We're going to get into how to create an actual purchase order using those recommendations, and then customizations that you can make based on any sort of limitations or specifications that your supplier has. Anybody in e-commerce will know that there are a lot of those. They vary from supplier to supplier. So we'll just talk about how to handle all of that information and really systematize that so that you can scale your business a little bit more. So let's get into this a little bit more. First, we have a poll. So we'd like to know what your biggest challenges are right now with inventory ordering and replenishment. So we've laid out a few options here, including time spent figuring out the specifics of which items to order, how many of them to order, frequently running out of stock, so you're missing out on revenue, or being overstocked, which means that your cash is tied up on those items. So feel free to weigh in on those. I think these are definitely all things that a lot of us have encountered, and we hear from other merchants as we're talking to them as well. So we'll be curious to know what your feedback is on this one. All right, getting a couple more in. Okay, so I'll go ahead and share these results. So it looks like frequently running out of stock is the top answer by far that we're seeing here, but also the specifics of figuring out what to order, how many, and those sort of things. So that's great. That's great to know. It's not great that it's happening. It's great to know. So we'll be sure to touch on those topics as we get into this a little bit more. All right, so let's dig into it. Introduction to demand planning. What is it? So what we're looking at is thinking about what past behavior of our customers will best indicate how they will behave in the future. So if they've actually spent their money on certain products in the past with certain characteristics, specific products, how can we use that data to figure out what they're going to do in the future and therefore meet them where they are and have what they need available. So that means having the inventory they want, when they want it, and where they want it. So it doesn't help to have it in the East Coast warehouse if they're on the West Coast and you need to ship it from that location. So it's really about anticipating what their behavior is going to be so that we can have it available. So without demand planning, it can really be a guessing game, or you could be living in spreadsheet land trying to figure out, what to order. As a merchant myself, we definitely played the guessing game, wandering around our warehouse, trying to figure out what to order. So this is a way that can help you scale your business, both to save you time because it's more data driven, can really provide a lot more specific recommendations. And then also shows you the best return on your investment for that inventory. So really thinking about, which products can I invest in so that I can get profit back as quickly as possible, so that we can get our stock turn as fast as possible, and reinvest in our business so that it's continuing to be productive. So now I'm going to send it over to Basil, who I know a lot of you have probably talked to on demos as well. And he's going to get into some more about how to customize your forecast methods so that you can see those recommendations for specific products. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll send it over to Basil.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. All right. Am I up and running? Jill, you can see me, right?
Yep, good.
All right. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. I popped into our demo store here. If you don't know how to access this, you can come to inventory-planner.com anytime. You're going to notice a demo widget up here on the top right. Okay. Now we've gotten an integrations page going here recently. It's going to show you all of the systems we integrate with. Now we've added some more recently. We have over 30 different integrations now. And if we select any of these, this will show all of the inventory management systems that we connect with. If you're able to connect through an inventory management system, we can pick up everything from there. It's not necessary to add the individual sales platforms if we're able to get all product, sales, stock information from an inventory management system. So keep in mind with Inventory Planner, what we're doing is we're getting all of your product information as soon as we connect, along with your current stock information. And we're getting your historic sales data so we can come up with your forecasted needs. We're also going to, not only do we get your current stock, but we're going to track that moving forward. So you're going to be able to track your stock history starting with the day you connect to Inventory Planner. We're also going to track when you're going out of stock, since we're taking a snapshot of that every day, and you'll have the opportunity to consider that as part of your forecasting analysis as well. So we can add multiple stores to Inventory Planner to the same account, or stores with different warehouses. You can enable and disable different warehouses. What this table here is going to show you is what kind of information we're bringing over from your system. So if we were just to select, for example, Shopify and Amazon, you'll see how we can bring product images in from your system. Some systems we're going to be able to carry vendor information, supplier data into Inventory Planner, so it'll be seamless to start creating purchase orders. Other connections, you'll have to come in, create vendors, associate your variants with vendors, and build up that library just a little bit so you can start getting in there, creating purchase orders. So what does all this mean? When I come back over to our demo store, so remember you can select in the top right here, you can come in here at any time and poke around our demo store a bit. You're going to see our overview page as soon as you come in. What I'm going to do is head down to the account button here on the bottom left, into settings. And here is where you can configure your locations a bit. So in our demo store, we've connected a couple Shopify stores, Shopify US store with one warehouse, Shopify UK store, one warehouse, and a couple Amazon stores. Amazon has a unique integration. And if you're curious to know more about exactly how that works, we have some really thorough documentation you're going to find in the bottom right. You can always search for articles and definitions and everything here in the bottom right. It's a really helpful place to go. Any locations that we enable here as part of our setup, once we go to the different sections of Inventory Planner, such as this replenishment section, this is where your forecasting and replenishment is really concentrated, all your planning. Any locations that we enable are going to appear here as options in the top left that we can switch between and see a ton of information. There's over 180 metrics that you can add to this table. You're going to see a little gear icon here in the top right. We could add in ASIN. We could add in, let's say, when an item was first sold. I could add, my cost price into this table, and I could put my cost price here next to my stock, so I can customize the order of these columns. I can save multiple presets, so I can always see the columns I want to see, where I want to see them. And it's going to be a similar idea with filters. We're picking up generally what's active or published in your system. We're getting all products from your system. So, you know, you can see what's inactive. You can go back and check that stuff anytime. We can see what's tracked or not. And then items, since we're getting everything from your system, if you have items that are discontinued or drop shipped, anything we don't need to see, we can grab those items. You can always grab multiple items or everything on a page or everything that's returning in a table. Anytime you make selections like this, you're gonna notice a bulk actions button at the bottom, and it's gonna let us do all kinds of different mass actions. One of those is gonna be this non-replenishable button. Simply turns items off. This filter will hide them. You can still go back and see them anytime. You can turn them back on. We're only ever billing against replenishable variants, so it's good practice in general just to get them out of your way and mark that stuff as non-replenishable, since you can't delete it completely out of our system. You can always click up here and add all kinds of other filters as well, depending on your integration and your setup. You could add tags and filter to see those specific items, or we can just search specific keywords up here and press enter and then see that information as well. So different ways of searching. Now, since you guys are the special class that popped in here on the webinar, I'll show you one of my favorite little tricks here. So if you grab an item, for example, here, paste it. Let's say we're just trying to find multiple SKUs at the same time, and you have a list. You can always just separate with comma. So I could say BW345. So I want to search both of these items. Oh, it didn't work right now. Yeah, so this is a function that'll generally work though. If you separate items there with a comma, you're gonna be able to pull multiple items at the same time. So just a fun little trick that you'll be able to see. But let's talk a little bit more about forecasting. We know that's the real reason you're here. First of all, you're gonna notice that there's another location here. It's our combined warehouse. I'm gonna come back to account settings. That's part of the location setup, is we can create what's called a combined warehouse. So we're gonna enable individual locations that we need to really, really dig into. If we don't need to, let's say we don't need to see FBM, so merchant fulfilled Amazon stuff. Maybe we fulfill that out of another warehouse. We don't need to see it on its own, but we need to count it as part of another location. We need to count those sales somewhere. That's the idea of a combined warehouse. We can create a combined warehouse that is an aggregate view, totaling together sales and stock from different locations. We can even finesse these rules. So let's say FBM, let's count the sales there, but let's ignore the stock. Maybe we're fulfilling that out of the Shopify warehouse already. So we can really get in there and customize those rules. Once we set up that combined warehouse and you enable it, it'll appear as an option as well that you can click and go and see. You'll see little question mark bubbles next to your stock figures over here. You'll see exactly how it breaks down, what we're adding or what we're not adding. And then you're gonna notice these details buttons over here. They're I buttons. We call this a details icon. Now, if you ever don't see this in your table, you'll remember the gear icon over here. Make sure you have that details column added. That's exactly what it'll show over here. So once you have that details icon, once you click into it, you're gonna get a ton of useful information about your forecast. You're also gonna be able to see past sales, forecasted sales, and how essentially that's breaking down. We'll see how those past sales break down by location, the same way you saw with your stock. Now, before we really dig into that piece, I'm gonna go back to my account settings, and I'm gonna click on this forecast tab. So a big piece of your setup and getting accurate recommendations in Inventory Planner is setting up the right forecast method in settings. So when I was talking with Jill a little bit yesterday, I've started to think, maybe it's just that I'm really hungry lately, but I started thinking about a cake. Where we're building a cake together, and the first layer of our cake is building that baseline forecast. We're coming up with your forecasted needs by item. And when you connected your system, we're getting all of your individual sales orders. We're going back in time. We're getting all that information in to come up with those forecasted needs by item. Everything is going to start with the default forecast method in settings here. We can customize that. You're going to notice this catalog button over here on the left. This is like a library of information. One of many different actions you can take in that catalog is to customize your forecast settings by SKU. So everything is going to start with these default settings. Let's say so we have items. We're using this recent sales and trends method. Now these first couple methods are non-seasonal approaches. This first one here. Oh, look at our pullback. Yeah, this is a good one. So let us know. We'd love to know what kind of how your items break down. And what's useful is you can use different methods depending on how your variants are set up. Recent sales and trends is going to allow you to select a specific time frame. Select, last 3 months if things have been a little bit different since coronavirus, for example, or maybe we could look at the last year. So the way that we currently have it set up, looking at the last 3 years, we're going to start with the first date and item sold if it doesn't quite have this much history, and we're going to get a daily sales average during that period. And that's going to set up the baseline for the forecast. There's also a recent trend field in here, so we can say, you know, if an item has been increasing in sales for 2 consecutive months, then let's start to incorporate that, or decreasing for 2 consecutive months. The more we lift up that number, the less reactive that trend factor is going to be. This is the number of consecutive months that we need to see that trend to pick it up in your forecast. Let's say you have some brand new items. You have no idea how they're going to perform, but you just can't keep them on the shelves. Ah, we got a lot of seasonal guys over here. All right. So let's say you have some brand new items. We have no idea how they're going to perform. For those, we could use a last sales method. This would allow you to drill into recent days. Let's say we want to look at the last 15 days, and that's going to set up the baseline forecast for an item. So that's really good for something that we just need to be very reactive with. The seasonal forecast, this is good for items that have at least 12 months of history, so we can see how it's performed in prior Julys to help forecast July, prior Decembers to help forecast December. We're going to see how it performs at different times of year, and we're also going to apply a year-over-year growth trend. We look at the last 12 months versus the prior 12 months. Now let's say you have a lot of seasonality in your store, items don't quite have that much history, that's where your top-down method is going to come into play. Both of these function pretty similarly. What we're doing is we're coming up with a seasonal forecast at a higher level, such as category, which is the product type in many systems. We're going to create a seasonal forecast at a higher level and just give a certain amount of that forecast to the variants that are part of that category based on their contribution of sales. All right, so we can set different items with different methods. We can also adjust this key setting. This is going to be a really important one. It's often misunderstood, and it's such a powerful setting. We can change this by item. You want to enable this use stockouts history button for anything where you do not accept back orders. So if your sales are limited due to available stock, then it's a helpful setting to have on. Now, if you're accepting sales when you don't have the stock, this is going to throw off your forecasting. What it does essentially, let's say with our default settings, let's say in the month of April, for example, I sold 100 units, but I was out of stock for half of the month. All right. If we pick that information up, keep in mind, we're not going to know what it looked like in the past, but we're going to grab it starting with the day you connected to Inventory Planner. But if we know that now, you sold 100 units in April, you're out of stock for half the month, having this setting on is going to treat April as if we sold 200 units. So it's going to adjust that forecast, incorporating your stock out information over time. So it changes a few things, and it's a really key one. So it's something that we want to be careful with and adjust it by SKU as needed. If you have something on pre-order or back order, you might want to turn it off temporarily. So that said, let's head over to this replenishment area. And I'm going to go to one specific warehouse and let's just grab an item, okay? So these details icons, we talked a little bit about it earlier. We can click into any of them and we're going to see this information broken down thoroughly. So for here, I'm in here for one particular SKU right now, and we're seeing a summary of our default method. Now, if I come back to this, there's different tabs in this window. If I click forecast settings, notice everything's grayed out here. It's because we're using our default settings. I could turn on the custom settings, which turns off the default for this one. Change this to a last sales method, looking at the last 20 days or something. Turn the setting on or off. Maybe it's a brand new item. We don't have any history. We wanted to use like a seasonal method or something. Maybe this is new and replacing another item. Well, that's why you actually have this option here at the bottom. You can copy history from another item and bring it over to the new item. Let's say this is replacing an old item. Let's bring over the history from this other item. It's going to perform about 75% as well. So you can really zone in there. And then we could say, let's combine those sales until a specific date when the new item has enough sales to take off. Because we're always using your past sales to come up with your forecast information. I'm resetting that. We're going back to our default settings. I'm going to head back to replenishment forecast tab here. What else do we see? So we're going to try to go back 3 years, but we don't have that much data. We're going to start with the first date it sold. We see it's 365 day period, and there's 543 sales. We're going to remove some holidays that might inflate the forecast because this is a non-seasonal approach. And we're going to come up with this adjustment here. 526 divided by 353 sets up your sales velocity. So this would be the baseline of your forecast. except we check that against your recent trends. Remember how we had that recent trend factor in. Now we've noticed here that this has actually been increasing in sales just a little bit for the last 4 months. Now where do we see this information? Here's past sales, here is this solid line, forecasted sales is this dotted line. It's all going to correspond with what you see at this table at the bottom. So we can override any of these numbers. Remember, we're building a cake, a delicious cake. And the first layer is we set up the baseline for that forecast. The second layer is going to say, you know, we have to make some adjustments. We have to tweak some things. September, we're doing a big promotion. We're going to sell 150 units. In the holidays, we're going to be up 20% this time. And then January, we're going to be down 15%. You'll see those adjustments here at the bottom. If you save them in, you're going to notice that you'll see those overrides here in the chart as well. They'll be orange. You can always delete them out and just save it, and it would restore your forecast. That information's still there. Anything you can do in here for one item, you could do for a ton of items at the same time. So if we come back here, you remember with the non-replenishable button, we select items, we get that bulk actions button. One of many actions here, changing forecast percentages. We could grab a ton of items, take them up in October by 20% or something. So get a lot of flexibility with that bulk actions button. Let's go ahead and back into an item here. So now at this point, we've made adjustments to our forecast. Now, if you want to adjust a lot of items at once, that's where this edit forecast section is coming into play. It's another way of viewing this data. So it's the second layer of our cake. Now let's say whether we come in here and we're making adjustments, hard key overrides to the forecast, or we take it up by a certain percentage. Now what I like about this screen, remember those little charts we see in the details icon? Well, you're seeing those also on this edit forecast tab. Little previews of those charts, past sales, forecasted sales. Personally, I like to scan through here, see just on a quick glance, does it feel realistic? Does it feel good? Now, if you have a lot of SKUs, maybe you need to make adjustments at a slightly higher level, like by vendor, by category, let's say across the total store. So my total Shopify warehouse, for example, maybe we're gonna sell 10,000 units. We're doing a big old Black Friday sale. We could say we're gonna sell 10,000 units, and we're gonna take those incremental units and distribute it down to all 98 variants that are part of that total. So we can override at a higher level and force it downwards based on a sales ratio as well. So whether we're changing a lot of items one by one, a lot of items at once, or we're even forcing changes from a higher level. A lot of flexibility with the second layer of our cake. So now we're gonna come back. We know what you're expecting to sell and when you expect to sell it. Now we need to layer on our replenishment planning settings. That is specifically your lead time and your days of stock. Now these are really, really key to getting accurate recommendations in the system. It's basically gonna tell us, let's say, if you have 18, this is our example item. So let's say you have 19 units in stock today. We'll see if you have units coming on order from a supplier. You'll notice this is purple text. You can click in, you can see which POs they're connected to. If you're connected through an inventory management system, we're gonna be pulling that all in automatically. You're gonna find it in that purchase orders section. Same idea with transfers. These would be warehouse transfers. We'll pull in, for example, FBA inbound shipments for Amazon. So you'll notice all that information's here. And then as you create purchase orders moving forward in Inventory Planner and transfer orders, all of that is gonna be here as well. We're seeing exactly when that stuff is coming, and we're taking it into consideration as part of our calculation as well. What we're doing is we see you have 19 in stock today. What we're gonna do, say the lead time here, these are just some dummy numbers. We're saying if we place an order to our supplier today, that it's gonna arrive and it's gonna be ready for customers. This new stock that we're bringing in is gonna be ready for customers by August 5th, 14 days from now. So what we do is we're forecasting what the stock position looks like 14 days from now, specifically on August 5th. At that point, depending on your stock position as of August 5th, we're gonna recommend enough to cover the following X days, your days of stock. So we're actually looking specifically between August 5th and September 4th to drive a recommendation. The more we add to our days of stock, the bigger of a buffer we're building for ourselves, because we're reaching a little further into this period to say what's needed for this item at that time of year to give us a little bit of extra. That's why we recommend adding to your days of stock to build a buffer, rather than just adding safety stock, as we know as a traditional kind of term that we're used to as well. And that can be added as well. We could select, for example, let's say we don't adjust days of stock. We could select items, bulk actions. We could set a minimum stock. That would say, hey, let's make sure that we never get below 5 units or 10 units. But it's just a flat number. That's why we generally recommend build up your days of stock, give yourself a little bit of buffer based on what's going on with that item at that time of year. If you ever if you're trying to wrap on all this information, don't worry about it, because you can click back into this details icon and you're going to see that whole narrative painted in this forecast stock chart. I love this one. Now you'll notice LT, this chart here, lead time, days of stock. These are our 2 periods that we talked about. So today, this is our whole narrative. Today we have 19 units in stock. Every day that goes by, we're going to sell a little bit more. We're going to sell a little bit more until we run out of stock during our lead time. Now we told the system we don't accept back orders. Remember that stock out setting? That's one of the implications, is saying we don't accept back orders in this case. If I turned it off, we would forecast some back orders as well. In this case, we do not. Because we run out of stock, we're actually forecasting some lost revenue, and you can pull those metrics into your reports. So when we forecast what your stock is going to look like 14 days from now, we know it's going to be 0. And that's exactly what this table is explaining to us. So you're going to actually be at 0 by August 5th, and we're going to sell 65 units over the next 30 days between August 5th and September 4th. So we're going to recommend that you order 65 units. If you do, it would take your stock up to that green line. It's going to cover your needs through the end of that period. And we're using all these forecast adjustments. We're breaking it down by day to ultimately look at what your stock position is going to look like. So now once we get all that together, we say, all right, this feels good with this replenishment recommendation. We can go ahead and grab the items as we'd like. And we can go ahead, as you make selections, you're going to see this button here to create a purchase order. But let's say if I was like, for example, in Amazon or another location, maybe I need to do a transfer order instead. You'll notice a little arrow here. We could create a transfer order instead, but it's going to all be the same logic. We're always going to want to set up the lead time based on how long it's going to take to get new stock, and then days of stock to be the coverage once it arrives. So if it's a transfer, I would just make my lead time shorter. But right now I want to create a purchase order to my supplier, so I'm having a little bit longer lead time. And go ahead and create that purchase order. I'm going to let Jill talk a little bit about purchase orders here, but what you're going to notice, one thing, is that this vendor button up here, so we're pulling in vendor information, we're pulling in some different information here. So anything that lives in this catalog section, this library of information, it's going to appear here automatically by the time you even get to the PO. So if we have vendors, for example, they're going to be, we'll see the vendors, we'll see which variants are associated with which vendors. We can go to catalog vendor attributes. We'll see those variants. We'll see which vendors they're associated with. We're going to pull cost price information from most systems. Make sure you check that integrations page from our home page to see which ones we do. You can override this information, but if you do, notice it just overrides it in our system. So you can go back and restore it to your system anytime. We don't push this information back to your system or anything. We're strictly pulling it in. But you can always update that information. Or maybe you have other rules that you need to factor in, like minimum order quantities or units of measurement. If we have to order in cases of 6 or 10, we can add that information in. Now there's a gear icon in a lot of these different reports. One of those that's a little tucked up in here is tier pricing. This is a newer feature. This will be bulk discounts from your supplier. Any kind of rules that you add in here are going to be added automatically by the time you even get to the purchase order. We'll round it to the nearest case pack, for example, or we'll use we're going to use different kind of information, and based on the rules, how you have them all plugged in here. So if you ever have questions about your properties, how things are set up, keep an eye on this catalog section. Once we create that purchase order, it's going to appear here in this purchase orders tab. And at this point, I'm going to send it back to Jill just to give you a little bit more information on how purchase orders work. All right.
Thanks so much. So we're getting some good questions as well. So I think that we'll go through the process of creating that purchase order and then come back to some questions about how to consider special circumstances, whether it's product related, might have seen an unusual spike in sales. So thanks for the questions. Keep dropping those either in the chat or the Q&A section, and we'll be sure to address those by the end of the webinar here. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll walk through how to create a purchase order. So now that we have all of those recommendations that we've seen that Basil walked us through, so we've got our recommendations. Anything in that replenishment column from the replenishment screen is going to show automatically in the ordered column on our purchase order. You can adjust this if you need to. You can manually change it if you'd like to. Or some of those fields that Basil talked about, if we have a minimum order quantity, I can enter that here if we have to order at least 150. You can see that this changed on the purchase order. You can hover over the little alert to see what change happened. So it's totally transparent to you. You can see what the adjustment was to your purchase order. If we have units of measurement, so if you have a case size or certain multiples that you need to order in, that's called units of measurement. So here, if we have to order in multiples of 25, I'll enter that here. And so the way that we're going to read this is there's 25 in a case. We have 3 cases, and then that means we're ordering 75 individual units. So this can help with translation with your supplier. If they're just thinking in terms of cases, you can include the UOM cases on your purchase order. So you can receive as individual units, you can order in cases, all of that's available here. And as Basil mentioned, once this is saved into the catalog, you don't need to enter that manually as I did on this purchase order. You can even save down here at the bottom, this checkbox, update vendor information on items. So that will be saved in the system. This can save you a lot of time when creating your purchase order in the future. So all of that's saved in there. Our other fields such as vendor reference, again, this helps with making sure that you're getting the right items. Our friends, the suppliers, don't always send us the right items, right? So we want to make sure that we're communicating as clearly as possible what those items are, exactly what we want. And if they have a different reference, if they have a different SKU, you can enter that here on the vendor reference column. One other thing worth mentioning here, you can see that we're dealing with different currencies in our purchase order. So you can customize the currency that you deal with on the purchase order that your vendor needs to see on the purchase order. Then everywhere else in Inventory Planner, we're going to convert that into your account's home currency. So if the rest of our account is in US dollars, it will take the equivalent of the cost price of our cost of goods. It's converting all of that for reporting purposes so that we can see it standardized in the replenishment screen in some of our other reports over here. But for the purchase order, we need it in a different currency. And so you can always see that here in settings. And then here under our vendor, we can select the currency. And all of that can be configured in the catalog so that the system remembers that. You don't need to change it each time. So we're going to talk through a couple of workflows of the purchase order based on what system you've connected to Inventory Planner. So here we're looking at a Shopify connection. So with a Shopify store connected, we'll create our purchase order. I'll click create down here at the bottom. And then you can also handle your receiving here in Inventory Planner. So we can either type in a number here if we received less than the amount that we ordered, or if we received the full amount, I can click on this arrow and that will automatically show this. If I click receive remaining, it will fill in everything else that we've ordered here. We also have some other methods such as using a barcode scanner, and you can receive by importing a file. So for example, if you have a long list of SKUs that you're receiving, maybe you're using a separate warehouse system or have a third-party logistics company, you can upload that information to receive all of your items on your purchase order accurately. So once we've received items, I'm going to click on save. And now I'll have the chance to push this stock to Shopify. This is the only time that Inventory Planner can push a change to inventory levels in your Shopify store. Now, this is one time where we've added a couple more steps because this is really important. We don't want you doing this by accident. So you have this confirmation screen that looks at what your stock is right now, what the adjustment is you're making, and then what your stock will look like afterwards. So you can confirm all of this before you make any sort of update. Now, you only want to do this if Shopify is controlling your stock levels. If you have a separate system, a warehouse management system, an inventory management system that's actually controlling your stock levels, you won't want to adjust this in Shopify. You can just stop after the receiving information. But if we do want to push this adjustment to Shopify, then I'll click on Update Selected, and then we'll see a confirmation. So we've got this green button up here. In your store, it would show Shopify in green, and then we had a confirmation here up in the upper right-hand corner. We've also got this check mark that shows that we've increased the stock as well. So you'll see that in a few different places. You can always check Actions and then History to see stock updates as well. So that will save you a step. It can cut out the chance for human error when you're adjusting those inventory levels within Shopify. On the other hand, if you are connected using Amazon as an example, or you're connected using an inventory management system, that could be something like Skubana, TradeGecko, Ordoro, Sin7. There's a number of them that we connect with. So anything in that category, you'll actually create your purchase order in Inventory Planner. So I'm picking up with that step where, we can make our adjustments as needed. We've got this configured exactly how we want it to. We'll click on Create. At this point, we're going to see a pop-up that says, in this case, we're saving to an Amazon account. So this is going to sync to your Seller Central account. You can configure this as you like to, related to labels, shipments, bring in our vendor address. This will be based on prior addresses that you've used in Seller Central, and you can sync it over. Similarly, if you're syncing with or you're connected with an inventory management system, you'll see a pop-up at this point that says, do you want to save this to Skubana, to TradeGecko, to your connected platform? Then from there on out, everything with the purchase order happens in your other system. So in Amazon, we will pull in receiving updates, any sort of status update for your shipment from your Seller Central account that will show after the next sync with Inventory Planner. With your inventory management system, you can adjust your purchase order, items included on your purchase order, and after the next sync, we'll show that again in Inventory Planner. So there's no double entry of data. We're picking up that information from your connected platform. So 2 different workflows. Let me just recap really quickly based on what you're connecting to Inventory Planner. If you've connected your shopping cart or your sales platforms, such as Shopify, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, anything like that, you'll create your purchase order in Inventory Planner and handle your receiving in Inventory Planner, and then you can push a stock update to your platform. If you're using Amazon or an inventory management system, you'll create your purchase order in Inventory Planner, and at that point, then you'll sync it to your platform, and everything else with your purchase order or transfer happens on your connected platform. So those are the 2 workflows that can happen with your purchase order here. So that's the process of creating the purchase order within Inventory Planner. We've gone through the basic workflows, how to customize your forecast settings. I think we have some questions coming in, so we'll address those as well. And as I mentioned, we'll follow up with you afterwards. If you have any particular questions for your situation, we're glad to help with that as well. So let's pop over to some questions. So Basil, maybe if you want to take a question that we got in chat from Blake about how to ignore an anomaly month when you're setting up your forecast so that it doesn't affect that forecasting and kind of throw things off.
Sure, yeah, and I did type, I was typing the answers over here in the chat, but just to recap anybody else who's kind of having a similar issue there. So if there's an anomaly with sales, generally what we're recommending is picking a different time frame to drive that baseline of your forecast. For example, if you're using a recent sales and trends method, you could change that period. You could even have recent sales and trends method applied for all of your SKUs, and then go into specific SKUs, override the default, and change that period as you need to. So what we're generally suggesting is using a time period that ignores that anomaly. So currently you can't take specific dates and say exclude those from the forecast. It's something we're considering, but right now we're worried about some of the implications that might be there by excluding specific periods. So what we're recommending is that you use a forecast method and a time period that doesn't include that anomaly. And if you need to, for like a nuanced time period or something, to just adjust the forecast for that time so that beyond that, we're still getting accurate forecasting.
Perfect, thank you. Mariana, it looks like, and Basil typed in a question or an answer to this too, but let's answer it for everybody else. So had a question about if we are selling on 2 different platforms, so let's say Amazon and eBay, if we have an adjustment to one platform, is that going to affect forecasting for the other? And the answer is no. So you can make adjustments on one platform without affecting the other. So each location, as we showed you with the drop down, so you could have Shopify or Amazon in our examples here, each of those can be adjusted individually. So you could be running a promotion on your Shopify site that won't affect what's happening on your Amazon sales and promotions and what's happening over there and vice versa. So you can adjust that per item. Similarly, when you're creating a combined warehouse, you can make adjustments in the combined warehouse if there's something happening overall that will affect all of the contributing warehouses. It will affect just the forecast for that combined warehouse. So just be aware of the location that you're looking at the top of the screen in Inventory Planner. That's the only place that those adjustments are going to show. All right, and then it looks like, Ethan, you have a question about if there's a tag that's showing with your Sin 7 integration and it's not showing correctly in Inventory Planner. So typically if you wanted to change the tag for that, you'd adjust that in Sin 7. But if there's a specific issue that's happening with that and you're not able to adjust it in Sin 7 for some reason, why don't you drop down in the chat when you're logged into Inventory Planner. We're glad to help you troubleshoot that particular issue and see if there's something else happening there, but we can help you out with that.
Yeah, and just as an extension to that, I just want to say anytime that, you know, if you ever are, especially if you're newer to the system and you're noticing something's a little funky or it's not jiving with your system and you have a question about it, always the quickest way to help resolve it is to find, usually there's, you know, when we find an example case, it's usually indicative of what's going on with other items. There's a really useful report too. You're going to notice on the reports tab of Inventory Planner, that inventory KPI report allows you to drill into any date range, to select any item and kind of look what's going on with the stock or the sales for a very specific period of time or like a specific purchase order. So when you can send us a screenshot, that really helps to demonstrate it so we can recreate that problem on our side. It tends to lead to the quickest resolution. So the more information usually we can get, screenshots or even like a screen recording that helps to demonstrate one specific problem. And especially if you have like a screenshot from your system as to like what you're seeing in Sin 7 or something, it's usually the quickest way to get some feedback from our team to get a resolution for you.
Definitely. All right, another great question from Ethan. So this comes up pretty often. It sounds like you have special items, special orders. It could be kind of a make to order situation. And a good way to handle those in Inventory Planner is to set both your lead time and your days of stock to 0. That way you're basically seeing if your stock level is showing, let's say, -1. That will show a replenishment recommendation of 1 in that case, prompting you to say, oh, okay, somebody ordered this, and so I need to either make it, special order it, because it could be something that you don't want to have on hand. Whether that's a really expensive item, it could be something that's ordered very infrequently, so it's not worth having in stock at your location. But setting both your lead time and your days of stock to 0 is a nice way to prompt that when you don't actually want to have it on hand, but you do need to manage the ordering of that item. So Denise asked if this will be recorded. Yes, it is recorded. We'll be sure to share this afterwards as well. We'll follow up just a little bit later today with the recording. And so we'll be glad to follow up that way. It looks like we have one more question and then we're probably going to wrap, 2 more questions. And then we're probably going to wrap up, but feel free to, chat us when you're in Inventory Planner, email us, respond to the email you'll get a little bit later today with the recording. We're glad to help. And if you'd like to set up more time, where we can talk through your specific situation, we're very glad to do that too. So just let us know. So Basil, do you want to jump in?
Take one? Yeah, so we got one from Esther in the chat box, and then we have another question that came up from Oscar. I'm going to talk about Esther's here for a second. We cannot merge 2 forecasting methods, unfortunately. What you can do is you can pick a forecast method and you can make adjustments. So let's say, for example, you're using like a last sales method across the board. We're looking at the last 30 days or something, and that sets up the baseline for our forecast. then we can do a high level adjustment from the edit forecast screen to push everything up in November by 20% or something. So that's usually the way we're going to merge it. We did just roll out a change that we're still in the process of kind of tweaking, that is a non-seasonal approach. So if you're using like last sales or recent sales, we're detecting if there's like a big peak around the holidays. That's actually in that poll question that came earlier. That's actually why we asked it, because we were curious how many people this impacts. And it clearly impacts a lot of people who have a relatively non-seasonal business, but a big spike around Q4. So we've started to incorporate that. So now there's kind of a natural marrying of forecast methods in the sense of recent sales plus like a holiday lift factor. So, but that's just like something specific to that method. It's not possible though to like set up a merging of the methods. You would pick one and then massage your forecast to get the rest of the behavior that you want.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Okay, we have one last poll that I'm going to launch while we're answering some of these questions, but we'd love to get your feedback on what other topics you'd like us to cover in future polls. So let us know if there are topics that aren't covered here. Either drop it in the chat or again respond to the email that'll come a little bit later today about what other topics you'd like. So Mariana asked, is it possible to edit a purchase order after it's been pushed to Amazon? So you will actually edit that in Amazon in your Seller Central account, and then after the next sync with Inventory Planner, we'll pick up that change. So whether it's adding or removing an item, changing the units ordered, it could be splitting a shipment, any of those changes you're making within Seller Central, we're going to pick that up after the next sync. There's an automatic sync that happens overnight, or you can run a manual sync. Down in the lower left corner of Inventory Planner, there's a sync button. You can run a purchase order sync and it will update that information. So after you pushed it to Amazon, it's not possible to edit it within Inventory Planner, but you can in Seller Central, and we'll pick that up just to keep all of that data together and in sync. So, all right.
And just on Oscar's question, we've talked a bit about, of course, about editing forecast, whether you click into that details icon and come in there and make adjustments for like a specific item and its forecast. You can hard key override forecasts, or you can change them by a certain percentage. Those percentages would be applied against the natural forecast. So if the forecast continues to change, we would then say, take 10% over the revised forecast. There's a lot of different ways to do that. You could do it by selecting that details icon for one item. You could select multiple items and then use the bulk actions method to do a mass change to a lot of items, or you can go into that edit forecast screen and really drill in at a variety of levels. I would suggest the bottom right widget, that support widget. If you just search the article edit forecast, there's a ton of really useful techniques about how you can massage that forecast.
All right, perfect. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining us for this webinar. Really great to have you on, and thanks for the great questions too. We'll follow up. We'd love to hear from you on other questions that come up and what other topics you'd love to hear about. So thanks again for joining us today. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.